Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to hear from Dr. Rob McKenna. Rob is the CEO of Wild Leaders and a renowned expert in leadership development, celebrated for his groundbreaking work in fostering trust, driving performance, and connecting business strategy with the human side of leadership. Ranked among the top 30 most influential IO psychologists, Dr. McKenna has over 2 decades of research and practical experience that position him as a thought leader in crafting sustainable, people-centered organizations. His innovative methods bridge the divide between strategic business goals and the emotional and relational needs of leaders, teams, and individuals, creating thriving cultures that deliver results. Today, we get to talk about building resilient leaders and secure systems. And for more of Dr. McKenna's work in this area, you can read In the Jungle of Trust, Resilience Begins with You in the January 2025 issue of Security Management Online. Dr. McKenna, passing it to you.
Sometimes we would assume that certain people have trust all figured out. And especially when it comes to the people who are responsible for keeping us secure. And whether it's people in cybersecurity or physical security who are either guarding the gates or guarding the systems and the servers that make everything function, we know that trust is so critical. The thing that is so often missing is that we have failed to turn that same lens upon ourselves, because even in those industries, just like every industry, without trust, nothing happens. And I've said this so often before that without whole trust and a long and sustaining trust, nothing happens well. And what's crazy is you think that we would have it all figured out as senior leaders or more junior leaders, that we would have this trust thing figured out, but we haven't. And it takes work. It takes time to build these systems, because when we know this is true, right? When trust breaks down between us, it causes everything to go, as my dad would say, haywire. Everything kind of runs amok. And so this idea of, we can have the greatest systems in the world, the greatest security systems in the world. And if we aren't making that investment in the human beings who will operate those systems, we risk so much. And with just a little dose of intentionality, imagine what we could do when we more effectively connect the humanity, the human being who is a leader, to those systems, and we increase trust at every level of capacity. Imagine what begins to happen. And we want to treat these things, our security systems, as like they're robots. And there are parts of them that are. I get that. But as long as people are playing a role in it, we must take a look at the reality that we're talking about whole human beings who are functioning and leading those systems. And when we begin to integrate those two things together, we invest deeply in the people and the clear operational systems. And we have to do both. Empathy and compassion are not enough. They're important, but they're not enough. We need job clarity, the capacity to be direct and truthful with one another, and do that quickly. So what if we were able to increase that kind of trust? And that's what this conversation is about today.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
So a few years ago, I was invited to speak at the Great Conversation in Security with Brian Cook. And Brian is a security executive and former diplomatic security service special agent. And We were speaking on the crisis facing those in the security, risk, and resilience profession. And Brian said something that still echoes in my mind and the minds of all who were there. He said this: when it comes to risk and resilience, we have failed to turn a critical eye on ourselves. And what too many security professionals whisper out loud, even though it screams out inside of them, had been exposed. Every leader in that room was keenly aware that it is impossible to build effective systems for risk management, for assessing vulnerability, and for building resilience if we are not building that same capacity within the people and leaders who are responsible for those systems. And in the security industry, we have programs that audit an organization's ability to respond to both catastrophic security events and the most common threats. And we have yet to build that same level of resilience in the leaders and teams responsible for that response. We can do better, but it will take an intentional investment in applying the best research in the world on organizational performance and wellness and trust. So if you ask any leader in the security industry what trust has to do with the resilience of their programs, most will say this: everything. Resilient systems are trusted systems, and resilient leaders are trusted leaders. And in too many cases, we see that trust has been the most important casualty in our war against bad actors. Without trust, communications break down, and our capacity to speak truthfully to one another is severely disabled. Without trust, our stakeholders will fail to partner with us effectively, risking the complete breakdown of our programs. And without trust, the best people will either wither and die in their jobs, or they will leave and find a better place to grow. You see, it's not only about getting the right people, it's also about having the ideal conditions for those people and ensuring that they are growing well together in our organizations. Imagine leading or serving in a place where the level of trust in the organization and its leaders is low, and the level of trust between team members is even lower. These are the jungles of trust. They are chaotic places that require an exhausting amount of emotional labor just to navigate the politics, let alone do our jobs well. And in jungles of trust, resilience is an aspiration we want so badly, but it is so far out of reach. And on the other end of the spectrum, imagine your organization is a stronghold of trust, where employees feel supported by clear structures and dependable leaders, and teams are united by integrity, by reliability, by strength and competence, by truth and transparency. And for leaders, reaching this stronghold requires a consistent commitment to building clear communication channels and fostering open, authentic relationships. Building this begins within every individual security leader who serves with us. Because at the heart of every resilient and sustainable security system is a resilient and trusted leader. Here's some more about trust, though. Trust is a feeling. It is a feeling, but it is so much more. Like oxygen, trust has a chemical makeup, a chemistry that includes many elements. And while we assume that it's impossible to measure with certainty something inside of us, and trust is one of these things that occurs within us, trust is measurable. I hope you will trust me when I say that. Trust is your belief in my integrity, my ability, my reliability, my strength, and that I will tell you the truth when any of those things are lacking. To trust a leader is to know that they will execute on the mission assigned to them, be able to do it consistently, will learn and get stronger and better, and that they will speak truthfully to others about all of those things. So trust requires us to know ourselves and to share that knowledge with others on our teams. But unfortunately, too many leaders either are not self-aware enough to know what to share, or they're unwilling to be vulnerable and open up their own deficiencies long enough for us to build deeper levels of trust. But what if they did? How would it impact the resilience of the programs they lead? How would it impact their personal resilience and their resilience of the resilience of their teams? Show me an organization full of leaders like that, and I will show you an organization on its way to being a stronghold of trust. So where in the world do we begin? Decades of research on leadership development have taught us something about the fundamental chemistry of a resilient and trusted leader, and it applies to every member of your team. What do we know about them? Here's a few things. Number one, they're willing to assess both their strengths and their vulnerabilities. Number two, they're clear about their purpose and have a line of sight between their personal purpose and the mission of their organization. Number three, they get meaningful results. They perform in their jobs. Number four, they're composed and difficult to rattle under pressure. Number five, they learn from their experiences. Imagine that. They learn from their experiences. Number six, they're clear about their areas of competence and their areas that need some work. Number seven, they know what motivates them. They know what drives that engine and motivates them. Number eight, they have strong support networks of mentors, role models, advisors, feedback, and emotional support all around them. Number nine, they make intentional and sacrificial investments in the development of the people in their care. And number 10, they take their development seriously and do not leave their resilience up to chance. And when a leader or a team member gains this kind of knowledge, they begin to grow. They are no longer blown by the winds of change and casualties of a VUCA world, but participate and lead in it. But if we are to take this level of awareness within the heart and mind of every security leader and every security team member and build trust together, this knowledge of ourselves must be shared. And that will take vulnerability and a methodology that is less prescriptive and more invitational. Trust is built between our team members when this kind of learning about ourselves is shared with others. And that takes the courage to get a little vulnerable, because that's when it gets interesting, is when that level of awareness of all these different pathways of those 10 things I mentioned, when I begin to understand these things and we begin to share that with our team members, we learn all kinds of things. And that's where trust gets super interesting. So one of our goals would be to make trust a hard target. The harder the target, the less likely the bad actors are to make a move against us. Imagine what it would look like if trust was a hard target in our organizations. Imagine how much easier it would be to create resilience and effective risk management systems if we trusted each other more. Resilience requires us to focus on systems and processes for security. But if we are to move our mission forward, we must start at the most basic level. Our efforts must begin with the resilience of the person, the leader, and the team. That was Brian Cook's point. We can measure trust, and we must start there to assess the risk. And then we must build it between us as systematically as we do the programs that guard the gates and keep us safe. We must make trust a hard target and move our organizations from jungles to strongholds of trust, one resilient leader at a time.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.